Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the podcast. I'm Lisa Manterfield. The serialized audiobook of The Smallest Thing finished last week, so this is a bonus episode. I've really enjoyed creating this podcast and I'm considering a second season. The Smallest Thing is my second novel, and a contender for season 2 is my first book, A Strange Companion. This book isn't yet produced as an audiobook, and I'm toying with the idea of narrating the book myself. Although I have some acting experience, I'm definitely not a pro, and can't bring all the voices and characters to life the way Charlie Sanderson does in The Smallest Thing. But what I can bring is the author's intention. No one knows this book better than I do, and I can bring a unique perspective to the story that an independent narrator can't. But before I commit to many hours in the sound booth, also known as my closet, I'd love your opinion on this. I've recorded the first chapter of A Strange Companion for you. Please take a listen, and then I'd like to ask you this. If I produced the full audiobook and also serialized it as a podcast in this format, would you prefer to hear the story read in my voice, or do you like the performance that a professional voiceover artist brings? I've put a link in the show notes to a quick yes, no, maybe poll about your preferences. It's completely anonymous, and I promise I won't be offended, so please be honest. For now, thank you again for coming with me on this podcasting adventure, and perhaps I'll see you back here in the new year. Until then, happy holidays and stay safe. Welcome to a sneak peek of A Strange Companion. Written by Lisa Manterfield, read for you by the author. Chapter 1. The Girl with the Dead Boyfriend. When the rain comes down in Wales, there's no avoiding it. In fact, it doesn't actually come down at all. It comes across, and sometimes up. It comes in billowing sheets of grey that envelop you in a sodden embrace of cold, damp misery, and hold you prisoner for days. There's no dodging the rain in Wales, no ducking into a doorway until it passes. The only way to deal with it is to put your head down and soldier on through. I slogged through this particular deluge one April morning in my second year of university. I hurried across the puddle-drenched courtyard between the environmental science building and the chemistry block, having long since resigned myself to the fact that I would spend the rest of the morning's lectures sitting in saturated underwear and wrinkling in unmentionable places. Despite this, a little ray of sunshine had settled in me, one tiny, happy thought to warm my insides for the rest of the day. Owen. Even saying his name, Owen, caused an exhale that relaxed me and allowed me to be myself. That feeling doubled in his easy, comfortable company. I ran over the plans of our big date for about the 100th time, wanting every detail to be perfect, even though Owen would flow with whatever happened. He'd offered to bring his legendary homemade chocolate hazelnut marble cake, and the rest was up to me. All the ingredients for the meal I would cook were stashed in a plastic box in my fridge and marked "Toxic, do not touch," to ward off my light-fingered flatmates. I had wine and candles and mood music, and, just in case, there were clean sheets on my bed. Everything was in place except my head. I sucked in a breath and ordered my hopping thoughts to settle. It's time, Cat, I told myself. In fact, it's long past time. I had to move on. I wanted to move on, and more to the point, I wanted to move on with Owen. I was still a good 10 strides from the cover of the building lobby when my phone chirped in my backpack with the special ring I'd set up for my brother. I fumbled with the pocket, trying to dodge for shelter while not wanting to miss the call I'd been anticipating for weeks. A couple of graduate students, the sort that spend most of their time peering down their noses at undergrads like me, huffed as they navigated around me and through the door I was blocking. I shuffled into the entranceway and poked a slippery finger at the screen, snapping the phone to my ear between worms of dripping hair. "Cat?" My brother's voice crackled with excitement, and I knew before he said another word that he finally had good news. "She's coming," he said. When? When will she be here? I yelped, dancing in sopping, squeaky circles on the wax linoleum tiles. A week on Wednesday, he said. Can you get away? I hesitated. That was 3 full days before the end of term. Technically, I could go. I wouldn't miss too many critical lectures, and my grades were nothing to worry about. But then what? Come straight back here? I wanted to stay longer, but something was stopping me from saying yes. So I said nothing. John forged on. I'm sending you a train ticket to meet us at the airport. Mom will be there, and she'll be glad to have you home for Easter for once. It would be great if you stay the full 3 weeks. He didn't wait for an answer, and before I could object to his committing me to further obligations, he hurried me off the phone. I have about 1 million people to ring, he said. I'll see you at the airport, and you can finally meet Mai. Her name hung in the air, the way the sound of a bell lingers. Mai. It took a moment for all the details to sink in, but finally, the pieces of reality began dropping into place. I was going to be an auntie. Auntie Cat. I'd already pictured taking my new niece on trips to the park and buying her ridiculously impractical clothes. I'd also envisioned being the older, wiser woman she turned to as she grew up, a worldly confidant that she could talk to about anything. I had vowed to take my auntyhood very seriously and be there for Mai from day one. I wasn't privy to all the details of how exactly Mai had become part of our family. I just knew it had been a long, hard road for my brother and his husband. It had started a couple of years ago when John and Alex took a month-long trip to China. They returned with photos of the Great Wall and the Forbidden City, a pair of silk pajamas for me, and a determination to adopt a baby girl from an orphanage that I was fairly certain wasn't part of the standard tour. Mai was almost 2 now, and they had been navigating the complex terrain of Chinese bureaucracy all that time. As the months passed, I amassed a collection of photos of Mai that arrived in the post from my brother. She had eggshell skin and a fuzz of dark hair that had grown into a curtain of straight black silk. From the photos, Mai's soft, dark eyes regarded the world coolly. Her expression showed no fear or unhappiness. It was poised, almost confident and very much at ease. An old soul is how my grandmother would have described her. I fell in love with her instantly. And now she was finally coming home to Sheffield, and I was going to be there to meet her. It should have been a cause for celebration, and it was, but going home would not be easy for me. Home was full of memories, and not all of them were good. I barely had time to absorb the full significance of my return home before a wave of students swept me into the nearby lecture hall. Dr. Carney, the chemistry professor, drew in wild scrawls, his big hands dwarfing the dry erase marker that squeaked across the board. His shiny pat bobbed like a bird's as he explained how atoms connect and form bonds, how sometimes those bonds are broken, leaving an atomic element open to form a new bond. Oxygen looking for a couple of hydrogens to hang out with to call themselves water, sodium getting pally with chlorine to make salt. This was all elementary stuff, but I kept my eyes on the board and tried to keep my mind firmly on my work. It wasn't easy. The reality of going back to Sheffield began to set in. I hadn't been home for more than a fleeting visit since I'd fled for the valleys of South Wales. Every end of term break, I made an excuse to stay on campus to study, or else I found myself a job, internship, or extracurricular volunteer program that made it impossible to spend more than a couple of days in the city where I'd grown up. It wasn't that I didn't like my hometown or my family. In fact, I missed them. But I didn't dare stay long enough to risk dredging up the ghost that still lingered there. Not all elements can combine, Dr. Carney said, interrupting my thoughts. It takes a very special bond to create a molecule. Over the rim of his half-moon spectacles, Dr. Carney scanned the room, his eyes pausing momentarily on me. And for some elements, there is only ever one possible bond, one perfect combination. One perfect combination. Who knew that life could be just like science? I had found that one perfect combination once. Gabe and I had been two unique elements, so unlike in many ways, and yet, when we'd come together, the reaction had been spontaneous and indisputably thermodynamic. But our fusion had been short-lived. Before long, I'd become a single element again. Single, but no longer complete, and apparently no longer able to combine. I tried so hard not to think about what might have been. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the future holds no guarantees. And anyway, who's to say where I'd be now if Gabe were still here? As my mother is apt to say, everything happens for a reason. But even she had the good sense not to say that about Gabe. By the end of my afternoon lectures, the rain had tapered to a drizzle, but the hazy glimpse of sun barely made it over the campus buildings, and the air was turning cold. I hurried across the quad, trying to focus on Owen. Perhaps if I moved fast enough, I could outrun my anxiety about going home and the images of Gabe that were pouring into the bottomless hole he'd left in me. I'd picked the university farthest from home, where no one knew me, no one remembered me from school. No one looked at me with that crimped, apologetic glance that said, I know who you are. You're that girl. You're the one with the dead boyfriend. No one here knew anything much about me, and I liked it that way. Here in Wales, I played the role of dedicated student, the nerdy girl who was more likely to be found in the library than the student union bar. Under my cover of boringness, I could keep my memories of Gabe tucked safely away. Once in a while, lifting a corner for a peek, but always able to put them away again, so that the next day would just be another ordinary day in my new life. But Mai's impending arrival had shaken my box of memories upside down, and now I was cavorting among them. The wind flipped a soggy lump of brown leaves past my feet, and along with it, an orange poster. As it somersaulted along, the black silhouette image of a climber hanging from a rock face and the friendly call for students to join the fun of the climbing club taunted me, reminding me again of all that had been lost. I zipped my fleece a little further up my chin and stomped on the poster. I wasn't going to let the guilt get to me again. I'd been over the story 1,000 times. What had happened to Gabe was not my fault. I rounded the corner into the street where I lived and stalked past the line of identical brick houses to the one that contained my very own damp, dreary room. The weight of my self-pity tugged at me, slowing me down with every step. Pull it together, cat, I said, kicking a discarded Fanta can and watching as it bounced into the gutter. It was stupid stomping around feeling sorry for myself again. What would Gabe have said? You only get one life, cat. You have to live it for all you're worth. I laughed to myself, thinking about that sparkle he would always get in his eyes. I wondered what he'd have to say about Owen. I circled back and retrieved the can from the gutter, dropping it into a nearby recycle bin. I would go home again. It was time. Everything that had happened with Gabe was in the past now, and the books I'd read had said to keep moving forward, to get back out into the world and start living. I had my future to think of, and that future included a little girl who was traveling all the way from China so that I could be her auntie. And maybe it included a blonde man from Sussex who allegedly made the best chocolate hazelnut marble cake in history. I hurried towards the house with my mind firmly set on Owen. I had 3 hours to prepare a 3-course dinner and turn myself from a drowned rat into something irresistible. I had to risk falling in love again. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that teaser. I look forward to seeing your votes. For now, thank you again for coming with me on this podcasting adventure. And perhaps I'll see you here in the new year. Until then, happy holidays and stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Smallest Thing. If you'd like to support the show, please leave a review and share this series with others you think might enjoy it. If you're on Instagram, tag me there at LisaManterfield_, or follow me on Facebook at @authorLisaManterfield and Twitter at LisaManterfield. My newsletter subscribers are always the first to know about my news, events, upcoming releases, giveaways and more. Sign up for monthly delivery at lisamanterfield.com/subscribe and get your complimentary copy of Love, Loss and Letting Go, 3 of my short stories. Thanks to Justin Joseph for producing and editing this show, and to Ketsa.uk for the music. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening.